Yo guys, Paunchy here, and today I'm going to show you how to use the delay on your Analog Four Mark II. Let's go. Alright guys, so I have a patch pulled up here. This is what it sounds like. Now the way to use the delay first and foremost is you select the track that you want, and then you go to the amp section, and you'll see there's a delay knob, which is the delay send. So that chooses how much of the track is being sent to the delay, which is just another way of saying the more you turn it up, the more delay you get. Okay, so I'm going to leave that up for right now. So the way to edit the delay parameters is you press the FX track and then you go to the amp section again. Well, it's not actually the amp section, because when you're on the FX track it takes you to the delay parameters. So we'll go through each one of these one by one. So TIM, that stands for time, and those are basically all from the bottom to the top. Those are basically divisions of the BPM. So the time is relative to the BPM. So if you cycle through, you'll notice that there's these fractions there. And so those are basically note divisions, again, of the BPM. So rather than just use like the numbers like 1 through 127, you can make your decision based on whether you want like an eighth note delay, quarter note delay, etc. So by default, I believe it's set to an eighth note delay. So an undotted eighth note delay. So X, that stands for basically ping pong, which is another way of saying instead of the delay being mono, the delay will go between the left and the right. It bounces between the left and the right. And so that kind of panning is controlled by the WID knob, which is the width knob. So it can go either positive or negative. So it basically controls whether it's mono or whether it's super wide. So, and then feedback, the way to look at the feedback is basically how many times do you want the delay to repeat. Now a good rule of thumb, it goes from 0 to 198, but the way I kind of look at it loosely is, say you have it at 50, that basically is almost like it's going to repeat 5 times. So 60 would be like 6 times, and you can kind of hear it here when you press it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it kind of fizzles out after a while, of course. Unless you turned up the volume, you could hear it better. But when you add more volume, it kind of repeats a little bit further past that. But that's kind of a loose way to look at it. So it just depends how long you want the delay to repeat. So HPF and LPF, now if you've seen any of my other videos on these effects and stuff, you'll definitely be familiar with this by now. But otherwise, HPF is high pass filter and LPF is low pass filter. So the way to remember that is high pass filter, you're allowing the highs to pass through and not the lows. Whereas LPF, you're allowing the lows to pass through and not the highs. So the way it is by default, it's allowing everything to pass through. So, but sometimes you don't want, for example, all the low frequencies to pass through, because that can kind of start to clutter up your mix a little bit. So sometimes you'll probably want to filter out the lows. So you would take HPF and you would turn that up to maybe 40, 50. That way if you put some delay on a something that has more bass, then you're not going to get so much of the bass frequencies coming out in the delay. So, and then, you know, using both of them together, you can kind of create this like band pass delay. So your delay would be only those frequencies underneath the triangle, basically. So if you wanted like a delay that just lets the high frequencies through, then you would use something like that. But keep in mind, that doesn't mean that it's going to magically add these frequencies. So if you do this bandpass delay, but you're using only bass notes, it's not going to magically add high frequencies to that bass note. It's just going to only allow the frequencies in that range. So that's one way to look at it. By default, when you start out, just leave them both off, leave it at a flat line. So OVR stands for overdrive. Now this basically controls how much overdrive you want on only the delayed signal. REV, that does stand for reverb, specifically reverb send. So that allows you to choose how much of the delay you're sending to the reverb. So by default, there's no reverb send. So what that means is that after the delay is the reverb, and the only thing that will be going to the reverb is the initial note from the track that you're using. If you turn up the reverb send, then that means the delay notes, the tail of the delay or the repeats will start to have their own reverb as well. So if you want something super spacey, you know, definitely turn up the reverb send on the delay. So, and then of course earlier I mentioned this volume here. This is basically the mix volume. So the way to look at that is if you have it all the way down, of course that's no delay, you're just getting dry signal, which is the other way to look at this is basically wet and dry. So if you have it in the middle, you're getting an equal amount of wet and dry signal, versus if you have it all the way up, you're only getting the delayed signal. So, you know, if you're going for, again, something super spacey, you probably want to turn it up to where it's more of the wet signal, you know, turn up the mix. So, but if you're just trying to go really subtle on the delay, you know, keep it down. Keep it down 25, 30, 40, you know, stuff like that, and you'll get a much more subtle delay without sounding too spacey, but you'll still add that, you know, that delay, which can kind of beef things up sometimes depending on how you use it. So, so some quick applications of this. One way to look at delay, a neat trick is if you turn the delay down super low, turn up your mix a bit, turn the time down super low, and you get kind of like a spacey effect in terms of reverb. So you could also kind of look at it as like, it's not quite a slapback delay, but it's just the point below a slapback delay where the delay is so fast that it just kind of adds an ambience to it rather than like a repeat, like a tick 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 tick, you know. So right here we have the delay time super fast, and the mix is up pretty high. But if we turn the mix down a little bit, then you kind of just get this ambient effect. Another cool thing you can do here is, you might have heard it a second ago, but if you change the time while you're doing the delay, you get this really cool spacey noise. So that's it for now. Hope that helped you guys. See you in the next video.